Hello, and thank you. We appreciate you for joining us today for CLS 2021 for our conversation about examining the legacy of urban Catholic schooling in the United States. My name is Charlie County. I direct Catholic teacher formation, our Urban Catholic Teacher Corps, and a few other things here at Boston College. And my colleague?
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Miller. I am an assistant professor of educational leadership here at the Lynch School of Education at Boston College.
All right, so with that, we'll jump right in, and thank you again for joining us. Please feel free to leave comments. We really do enjoy the online dialogue as well, so we want to invite you to that. So please keep your notes and add them to the page afterwards. So if we talk about this idea of sustaining the legacy, it's important for us to start the conversation about, well, what is this legacy? And examining this legacy of urban Catholic education, of Catholic schooling in the United States, it's essential to understand what that legacy is. What are we talking about? As the term legacy indicates, what it is about history, about tradition. And what we're arguing about is that it's worth sustaining this specific tradition, this specific history. And this idea is very much embedded in what Catholic education has been in the United States. For a quick history, Catholic education, as we all know, began in 1606 when the Franciscans opened the first Catholic school in what is now our current United States in Florida. Continued 1677, the Jesuits founded a school in Maryland. None of these schools were in cities by certainly any stretch of the imagination now, how we understand a city. But then we had about 718. The Franciscans opened a boys' school in New Orleans, and they were followed shortly thereafter in 1727 by the Ursuline sisters, who opened a girls' school. And that school, as I think probably most of you, if you're interested in this conversation, know, is our longest open and continually operated Catholic school in this country. And then we have, a stretch there, but not long. And then in 1782, the first parish school opened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So this parochial school, this model of parish schools in cities, certainly were very much committed to these urban gatherings. What became these modern day cities now had these beginnings then. But still, it's important to note that we're still talking in this period about 25,000 Catholics or so in this country. In fact, by 1840, Catholics made up less than 3% of the US population. However, beginning in the 20th century, we see at that point, about 20% of the population is Catholic. That began in the 1840s with Irish immigration, was followed by large Italian immigration, Lithuanian immigration, other immigrants from these predominantly Catholic countries coming to this country, to the United States, becoming citizens, but wanting to maintain their faith, their tradition. And they found that. They found that in Catholic schools. They found that they were able to not only come to the United States, build wealth, build knowledge, build a place in this country through Catholic education, but they really did find that these Catholic schools were that doorway to prosperity in this country. It isn't surprising that in 1977, when the Sacred Congregation for Catholic Education noted that first and foremost, the church offers its education service to the poor, the marginalized. They weren't speaking just about the ideal of Catholic education at that time, but they were talking about the known reality. Well, Catholic education has continued this tradition. This is our legacy, this legacy of caring for human dignity, of supporting the common good, and of doing all of this with a preferential option for the poor and marginalized. This is our legacy. If this is our legacy, if this is essential to the future of Catholic ed, the question is, well, if it's part of it, then why do we need to sustain it? Well, what we can quickly see is that Catholic education in our cities is dramatically decreasing. We see in 1967 and 68 in our elementary schools, we see that we had nearly 5,000 urban Catholic schools, and they were the predominant form of elementary Catholic education in this country. And they were serving immigrant populations, marginalized populations in these cities. But as we see, that's dramatically changed. And we are now seeing for the first time in the last few years that suburban Catholic schools outnumber urban Catholic schools. And this is as our entire Catholic ed sector continues to shrink. And this phenomenon is not unique to elementary Catholic schools. It is mirrored in secondary Catholic schools as well. If we are to maintain this legacy, we need to think very carefully about the future of urban Catholic education, and we need to think very carefully about how we can sustain.
Thank you, Charlie, for that opening overview of where we are right now with the legacy. What my role is now is to explain kind of what we've done over the course of the past several months. Many of you may have heard us speak at the NCEA conference about the empirical data collection, the new data that we are collecting about demographics in schools and urban schools, talking to school leaders, talking to system leaders. But it was also important for us to kind of take a step back and say, what do we actually know about contemporary urban Catholic schools, so that when we collect these new data, it can be in conversation with work that many people in the field, like Father Joe O'Keefe, have done before related to urban Catholic schools. So what we came to as a group of researchers, Charlie, myself, and others that work with us, including Annie Smith at NCEA, was that there's been a considerable amount of research that's been conducted on urban Catholic schools, but since 2007, nobody's attempted to synthesize all of those findings to make a case for what the legacy of urban Catholic education is in this contemporary moment, or what we should do about it. So what we decided to do was review all of the peer-reviewed, and the gold standard in the field is empirical research that goes through peer review. So we looked at all 80 studies that had something to do with urban Catholic education. We reviewed them, we synthesized them, we made sense of them, and we have recently had accepted our summary of these findings in the Urban Review, which is a journal publication focused on urban education themes. And so what we're going to present, what I'm going to present for you today, is a few of our central findings from this lit review of these 80 peer-reviewed studies that have focused on urban Catholic schools. So what we do in the article that I just referred to, and what I'm going to talk about here, are to respond to three major questions. There are three major questions that really mattered as we engaged in this work on urban Catholic education, reviewing the research and trying to see what urban Catholic schooling's legacy has been in this contemporary moment. And those three questions are, first, what do we know about who currently attends urban Catholic schools and the effects that those schools have on those students? Important that it's the effects that those particular urban schools that are studied have on the students that attend them. Second, what do we know about the way that these schools have operated as a system of schools or as a subsystem of schools? And then third, what do we know about any innovations? We always talk about the need for innovation in Catholic education. Well, what do we know about the innovations that have been tried, the ones that have been researched? So what I'll do now is provide a couple of highlight points about each of these three questions that we tried to answer by looking at these 80 studies that looked across multiple contexts across the entire US. Well, first, answering that question, what do we know about the students and the effects on the students? As Charlie mentioned, the empirical reality is changing demographics, right? Fewer students in these schools, and the people who are in the schools themselves, in these urban Catholic schools, the composition, the relative composition of who's in the schools is shifting. It's not a stable demographic. And over the course of the past 20 years, these shifts have happened. And so we know from work at the late 20th century that there was a noted Catholic school advantage. Well, where we are now from 2007 to the present is that this Catholic school advantage does exist in pockets, but it does not exist universally. This is now a rising research trend in urban Catholic schooling, that the Catholic school advantage is not universally present. It is true that should the most marginalized of people, the people who are students of color and students living below the poverty line, when those students attend Catholic schools, there do seem to be benefits, but because of the shifting demographics, we're seeing fewer and fewer of those students relative to where they were in these schools, still in these schools. And so we see a very difficult time measuring a Catholic school advantage. And on top of that, where the positive effects can be measured and where the positive effects have been measured, we don't see those positive effects being uniquely associated with urban Catholic schools. You can see high quality public schools, high quality charter schools, high quality private schools that aren't Catholic doing things that Catholic schools are also doing to have these both academic and non-academic effects on students. And so what we see across the 80 studies that have been published since 2007, Catholic school advantages exist, but they are not universally present. And there's nothing distinct and unique that can be measured right now in a Catholic school for a non-academic or academic effect that can say this is uniquely associated with a Catholic school advantage. So then we have to turn, okay, so that's not necessarily the most optimistic and rousing result that we find across these research findings. But what do we know about how these schools internally operate? What's going on inside urban Catholic schools? Well, what we do know is that we are in an era of competition, and that we don't need research to tell us that. We are in a very competitive era, both internally in Catholic education and between Catholic and public education. And so what we see in the research is Catholic schools are actually doing quite a good job keeping pace. As public schools go through major reforms, 90% of the kids in the country are in public schools, and the 10% of, or just under 10% of students that are in Catholic schools tend to be experiencing schooling the same way that people in public schools are experiencing schooling, right? There isn't necessarily a gap in the kinds of schooling experiences systemically and organizationally. However, Charlie mentioned that the legacy of urban Catholic schooling specifically is supposed to be about reaching out in a specific and intentional way to the socially marginalized in this country, students of color, low-income students, and people from lower status social groups. And there's been an inconsistent implementation in urban Catholic schooling about how to enact that Catholic social teaching or that social justice focus. So if that's what underlies our legacy, but we've got an inconsistent implementation of it, then that means that we've got to find the stakeholders who are doing it and figure out how they're doing what they're doing, because we know that parents and students seeking out an urban Catholic education are looking for it, and that's what they want. So across these three findings, what's going on inside urban Catholic schools? We keep pace with public schools, but we at times lose focus on our identity, which is focusing on Catholic social teaching and social justice. But that's what people are seeking us out for, it seems, from the research. And so we've got to deal with the fact that we don't do it consistently. So again, that gives us something to think about as we deal with what's going on inside urban Catholic schools. And finally, what do we know about innovations? Well, the easiest thing that we could do is try to track, and most of the research that we looked at in terms of the number of studies, we're tracking these innovations. So we try to categorize them. The first thing we did was say, what are the innovations? And there are four general types. There are interventions that happen, whether at a school or in multiple schools. There are partnerships that happen between schools or between schools and universities. There are different models that have been invented or enhanced, kind of like the Cristo Rey and Nativity Miguel models where they exist. And then there's this kind of underdeveloped idea of Catholic charter schooling, which is another innovation that has been somewhat researched, but under-researched for the potential that it has, especially in a post-Espinoza world. But what we find is that there are a lot of people who go and research an innovation, but there's no consensus across the research that any one of these is going to help us sustain a legacy of urban Catholic schooling. We've got to look across these categories and see what's good, what isn't good, what's working, what isn't working. And at the time, right now, between 2007 and the present, these past 20 years or so, there has not been a consensus that any one of these is the right formula to save urban Catholic schooling or to sustain urban Catholic schooling. So innovations exist and people have been trying a lot of things, not so sure that any one of these is the right way forward if we're going to sustain that legacy. So where do we go from here? Well, our team suggests the following as we approach the results of these reviews. We read these 80 studies in depth. And again, 80 studies is a lot of research that's been going on in urban Catholic schooling. So we know a lot, but where do we go given that the results aren't necessarily what we'd want to hear? Well, first, we would argue that there are more differences among the urban Catholic schools. the kinds of quality experiences that you might experience in an urban Catholic school than between your run-of-the-mill urban Catholic school and your run-of-the-mill urban public school. It tends to be, the research tells us, that the experiences of the kind of school you go to, whether urban or suburban or rural, is more predictive than necessarily what's going on between the Catholic and the public. So that makes us want to say, well, shouldn't we be distinct? Shouldn't we be enacting things in a distinct way? Our team would argue yes. And so if there are more differences between urban Catholic schools than between Catholic schools and public schools, we should do something about that. Secondly, our team is dealing with the fact that we can't market something that doesn't exist. So if we talk about the Catholic school advantage, we've got to be really precise about what that means and how we talk about it, because there are measurable Catholic school advantages, but those advantages might also exist in other places. And so let's not market something unless we know that we are precisely marketing a thing that exists, so that when we talk to parents, we're not dishonest, that we tell them this is what we're doing it intentionally, and this is the experience that your child will receive in our schools. And then the final point, which our team has taken away from reviewing all of this research, is some things are really working. We have great success stories in urban Catholic education, but we don't yet know why those things are working in the context, in the cities, in the locales where those things are working. So we frankly just need more research, because the only thing the research has told us is certain things exist, but we need to figure out how those things can be grown, brought to scale, because when stakeholders see urban Catholic education that sustains the legacy, they seem to really like it. They seem to love it. They're there, and they feel that they are being reached out to and ministered with intention. And so we need to find out what's working in those models and systematize that learning, because right now it is not systematic. We just have kind of one-off ad hoc stories about things that are working in urban Catholic ed. So that's all I have to say about our findings. We are collecting more empirical research now. We're talking to system leaders, we're talking to school leaders, and we're collecting more demographic data. But early start of this study, there's a lot yet to be done in urban Catholic ed, which excites us, but we don't necessarily know as much as we'd like to know. And so that's why we are continuing to do more empirical work. And I'll turn over the final thoughts to my colleague.
And the other point Andrew brings up is we all want to know more, because like you, if you're watching this video, we believe you probably have an interest in the future of urban Catholic education. You care deeply about this legacy. So please, we'll be calling and emailing to do some interviews. We're kind of at that stage of our research now, and we really hope you'll say yes to those requests, that you'll engage in this conversation with us, both here through the virtual means and CLS, as well as when we call to do interviews, and as we develop opportunities for various leaders, system leaders, school leaders, to continue these conversations with us beyond this study, as we all continue to work together as well. So we are looking forward. We are both not only looking to the past, as I started in saying this is part of our past, part of our history, part of our tradition. We also believe it's part of our future. This legacy is our future as well, as Catholic educators, as individuals that care about the faith formation of young people, about the opportunities we offer to individuals, about meeting individuals in our society with the greatest need. So we thank you for your time today. We encourage and are thankful for your participation, and we really hope for your involvement moving forward as well. So thank you very much, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and have a great day.